Hi everyone, Dave Hahn here. We're going to work through this dashboard slicer pivot table assignment, the Part B assignment. We have here on the first tab instructions and some helpful hints for some areas that may need some hints. And we will address those when we get to them. The first thing we're going to do is we have to clean up our data, and there are a number of ways that data can come to you. But a lot of cases, you'll just get a table. If it's pasted in, sometimes the formatting is a little messed up. So how do you fix this is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on row 4, on the number 4 of my row to highlight the entire row. I'm going to go down to the last row here, hold my shift key, and then click on that last row to select everything. So again, I clicked on 4, went down to 64, held my shift key down, and selected it. I shift selected it to grab everything. Now to even out the spacing here, I'm going to go between the border of the last row, 64, and the beginning of 65. And I'm going to put my cursor right on that border, and I'll get this double arrow pointing up and down. And I'm going to click and drag it down like one cell width and let go. And when I do that, it has spaced everything out. So again, what I did was I went between 64 and 65, the last highlighted row. I grabbed that border and dragged it down about 24 pixels. Here we go. So everything looks better. Now we're going to move on to the retail math. First thing we have to do is some more cleanup. Depending on who your data entry person was, we have to put in capital letters. We don't want to create two separate categories for a tops with a capital T and a tops with a lowercase t. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click anywhere in the table. I'll hit Control H, and I believe that's the same for both PC and Mac. I'm going to find anything with the word tops in lowercase and replace it with the word tops with an uppercase T. I'm going to replace all of these. So I type in the one I'm looking for, what I'm going to replace it with. 15 replacements, wow. All right, next one is lowercase denim and uppercase denim. And I'll replace all. 17 replacements. All right, next one is going to be dresses, lowercase dresses, uppercase, capital D dresses. Place all. Last one is accessories. ACCESSOR. 2 C's, 2 S's. Replace all. Boom. So we've fixed all of our text. I'm going to assume the rest of this is correct. The other area that we see a lot of errors are when people forget to put in their data. In this case, it's in the markdown % column. I have both blank cells, some cells with the word N/A. Now we can, when doing our calculations, put an if error function in there where we have a regular function in parentheses, and outside it we say if error, and then after the parentheses we say comma and what we want to print out. But if that's too complicated, we can just simply highlight this row. I clicked on the first cell here in my markdown %, Control Shift down arrow is Command Shift down arrow on a Mac, and it's being stopped by these errors. So I'm just going to keep clicking it until I get to the bottom at 64. Now that I have this column selected, I'm going to do my search, Control H, and we're going to look for any blank space. So I'll delete this text box so it has blank space, and I will replace it with 0 and %. And I'm going to replace all of them. 3 replacements were made. Now I'm going to look for those capital N/capital A's, and I'll replace all those. Great. And now we've cleaned up our data, and we just need to add our retail math here. So total sales is going to be equal to units sold multiplied by our retail price for total sales, right? And I can see that my column here doesn't have dollars, so I can select the whole column here, go to my Home tab, and click on Accounting or Currency, however we have it listed. For cost of goods sold, that's going to be equal to the number of units sold multiplied by cost. And again, I will add my $signs here. Gross margin is equal to our total sales minus our cost of goods sold. Total sales minus cost of goods sold. gross margin in dollars. Okay, for sell-through percent, that's going to be equal to units sold divided by, open parentheses, units sold plus units on hand. This is how we calculate our sell-through. We're calculating how many we sold through our entire inventory, how many we received, how many we sold plus how many we have on hand. And we'll take this column and we'll turn it into percent. Now for IMU, remember that old equation? Equals, open parentheses, retail price minus cost, close parentheses, divided by retail price. And we'll take that column and turn it into percent. Now, markdown sales risk will be our markdown times our sales, as listed here. Markdown sales risk. So we have our markdown multiplied by our sales. We have all of our numbers here. Now I'm going to add another column here called risk percent. If I hit enter, you'll see that Excel automatically adds another column to our table. So this is still included as a table. The colors aren't the same because we haven't standardized our colors yet, but we can always change that. So for risk percent, that equation I have over here, risk percent will be our markdown risk divided by on hand times retail price. So I have short-term memory issues, so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it over here where I can kind of see it. So I'll put that right here. So I have markdown risk divided by, open parentheses, on hand units times retail price. So let's do that. Equals, we have markdown risk divided by, open parentheses, on hand times retail price. Close parentheses, hit equals. We'll turn this entire column into percent. And there's our markdown risk. Now, in the instructions, we did ask you to do some conditional formatting for our markdown risk. If it's below 25%, make it green. If it's between 25 and 50%, make it yellow. If it's greater than 50%, make it red. So how we do that is I'm going to select this column, do a Control or Command Shift down arrow, and I'll go into my conditional formatting. Let's take a look at the rules. Okay, we do have some existing rules that we did not create. So sometimes there are existing rules that are already there. We don't need them because we already took care of our errors. So I can just delete both of these rules, hit apply. And now I'm going to add new rules. Under 25% green, between 25 and 50 yellow, and over 50 red. So I highlight the column, I go into conditional formatting, I can highlight cell rules, I can do highlight anything less than 25%, so we'll go less than. I'll type in 25% here. You can type in 25% with the symbol or 0.25, and we'll make that green. Hit OK. Now we can add another one. We can go highlight cell rules again if it's between I think it was 25% and 50%. We can make that yellow. Or highlight cell rules and go anything greater than 50%, make it red. And there's our risk areas, depending on what our markdown risk, our dollar amount is, and the dollar value of what we have left in our inventory. It's very high, like we have $2,800 worth of inventory, we're at a huge markdown risk. All right, let's move on to pivot tables. And I'm going to show you a shortcut on how to copy and paste pivot tables that I didn't show you last week. Over here, this top bar doesn't have an outline, so I could just add an outline there. I forgot to put one in, excuse me. And we have 3 pivot tables, slicers, and our dashboard here. I'm going to go to my data, and I want to put one here on A9 on this tab called Pivot Instructions. So I'm going to go to my data. We'll click over anywhere in our table, and we'll say Insert Pivot Table on an existing worksheet. The location will be over here on pivot table instructions. So I have nothing right here, but when I click on this tab, it puts the sheet name with an exclamation point. And then I want it on A9. So it gives me the absolute cell reference of A9 right here. And I'll add my pivot table. I need to put category into rows, sum of sales into my values. And we're going to sort from largest to smallest. Now I can't apply a filter, a sorting filter to a pivot table, but I can grab these values here. And if I go to my home tab and go to sort and filter, I can now sort largest to smallest. Usually you can just right click in here and do your sorting, but it's for some reason grayed out. So I had to go to my home tab and do it the old fashioned way. Now, once I have my pivot table here, I don't need to go back to my raw data to insert another pivot table. I can just take this. Okay, this is important. I'm going to select the whole pivot table. I'm going to hover my mouse over the outer edge, the border, and I'm going to hold my control key down until I see that move symbol with the plus sign, and I will drag it down over here and let go of the mouse button, and I've copy and pasted my pivot table without going back to my raw data. Now on a Mac, you may have to, after you go to your outer border here and hold your control key down and drag it, you may have to select paste new table or paste values. It will give you like a little extra step. But now I have 3 pivot tables here. From experience, I know I don't have, when I start changing this pivot table, it starts making a lot of space. So I need to move, I'll move this one kind of out of the way over here. After I've moved my pivot tables out of the way, I need to edit my fields. So the first one was format largest to smallest. I got that one out of the way. The second pivot table right here, I needed brand in my rows. So I need my pivot table fields here. I don't see my fields over here. Here they are. So for my second pivot table, I need brand in rows. I need sum of units sold and average IM. So sum of units sold. I'll get rid of total sales here. Sum of units sold and average IMU. So this is my second pivot table. Now, I need average IMU, so I'm going to click on this header and right-click and say summarize values by average. That will put my average here. I'm going to make this all percentage. All right, so I have sum of units sold, average IMU, and my brand. For my third pivot table, I need to put category into rows, which it already is. So on my third pivot table, I'm going to put category into rows, which I already have. I need, make some more space here. Average sell-through percent. Here's my sell-through. And sum of on-hand units. So I have 3 here. Now my sum of sell-through is going to be an average. So I'm going to click on my header right here. We'll right-click and we'll say summarize values by average. And we'll make this percentage. And my on-hand units, right? Oh, here we need to highlight low sell-through and high inventory. So low sell-through and high inventory. So I'm going to go to my inventory column and not to include my grand total column. And I'm just going to do some conditional formatting. Let's highlight top 10%, not top 10 items. We only have 4 items here, but top 10%. Let's make it red. And then my sell-through, let's do lowest 10%. We'll go highlight bottom 10%. Make it red. We can see that our accessories have both a low sell-through and a high inventory on hand. This item is at risk of a severe markdown, so we need to be careful about that. Next, we're going to add our slicers. To create my slicers for category, brand, and month, I'm going to click on any one of these pivot tables, and I'm going to go to Pivot Table Analyze tab and click on Insert Slicer for these items, category, brand, and month. We'll select category, brand, and month. Hit OK. Here are my 3 slicers. Sometimes we have 1 pivot table, sometimes we have 15 pivot tables. And when we make slicers, usually we want all of our pivot tables to be connected to each slicer. To check that, we can do it in two places. We can right-click on the slicer and go to this Report Connections option, or we can click on the slicer, go to the Slicer tab, and hit the Report Connections button up here. Either one works. I'm going to click on it and see that I have only one pivot table attached to the slicer, so I will connect the other two. I'm going to rinse and repeat and do it for these other two slicers. Report Connections, connect my pivot tables. Over here, Report Connections, connect my pivot tables. Now my pivot tables are all connected to my slicers. I'm going to Control Connect. I'm going to Control Select all of my slicers, holding the Control key down so I can select all of these. I believe on a Mac it's Command key to select all three slicers. Then I'm going to cut these out, and we will edit these further. I'm going to put my month on top, categories next, and brand, and we'll fix that formatting. Change this slicer. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit. I'm going to change my dimensions. So I right-click on my slicer here, go to Slicer, Size and Properties, and I'm going to go to Position and Layout, this drill down menu right here, and I'm going to increase my number of columns in my Position and Layout drop down here. I'll add 3 columns for my months. I'm going to increase my button height, and I'll do the same for my categories here. I'll drag this out, and I think I only need, maybe I need, you want 4 columns? Some button height. Here's my brands. And I will change my number of columns and my button height. And I can change this. So I have my 3 slicers here. I want to show you a new way to enter your numbers here. So in the past, what we did with these merged and centered cells was we just clicked on the cell and we said equals, and then we directed it over to our pivot table, sum of sales, hit enter, and then that number appears. But it's not very pretty. I mean, we could change the alignment here and maybe make the numbers big as what we did last time, but I'm going to show you another way. Let's insert some graphics on here to make it prettier. I'm going to go over here to my Insert tab and look for this symbol. It looks like a square and a circle. This is your Shapes dropdown. And we have many, many different shapes. We also have many icons. If you click on icons, you could add little pictures too, and photographs. So I'm going to go down to my Shape dropdown and go to Rounded Rectangle. I'm going to go to this corner and I'm going to drag out a rounded rectangle over my total sales. Now, immediately I have all kinds of settings, like a little miniature Illustrator here. And you can just choose like a basic template if you want. You can change your fill colors, your shape outlines. You can even add like a little drop shadow. I'm going to do that. Let's add a little drop shadow. My button. All right. And now, if I double click in my new button, I can type in some text, total sales. And I'm going to highlight this and make it bold and maybe make it a little bit bigger. I can highlight this word and I could give it a text effect here. I could give a little bit of a drop shadow on my text, make it a little cool. Now to add the numbers, this is a little tricky. This is a multi-part, so I want you to pay attention here. But once I do one, I can just copy and paste them and I don't have to edit anything much more in the future. It looks nicer and it's a little time saver here. I have my text here. I'm going to add a text box now for my numbers. And I'll put that right here. Now the text box will appear with a blinking cursor, but that won't help us. We need to, we cannot put functions into a text box. So we need to prep this first. I'm going to put my total sales number in here. So I'm going to go back to my pivot table instructions. And this number here, I can't put it in there because behind it is a bunch of pivot table math. So I need to simplify it. I'm going to go over here and we'll go equals, and I'm just going to point to this cell. And you can see the equation here, get pivot data, total sales, and the absolute cell reference. We don't need all that. Now that I have my numbers here, let's put some dollars on here. And I can see that this cell is C14. So when I go to my template here, I want to make this text box equal C14. So this blinking cursor is not going to help us. We need to click on the outline of this text box, the outer edge. And once I click on that, then in my function bar, I'm going to click equals. Now I'm going to go to my pivot table instructions and click on that new cell. And you'll see it says equals pivot table instructions sheet, which is the name of this sheet, cell C14, which is this cell. And once I have that, my number appears. I can now change my size to like 20. I can change my alignment. I can even change my text box color. Shape format, you click on that, we have all these options. Shape effects here. I can put a gradient in my shape fill. It's kind of neat. Maybe add a little drop shadow to my shape. Do that too. All right, once I have all this done here, now I can copy and paste these and I don't need to do as much work. And I'll demonstrate that. I'm going to grab this cell. I'm going to hold my control key down and I'll drag it over to copy and paste it. I'll do the same with my text box here. Hold the control key down and drag it over. I can actually do it for all of these. I'm going to drag this box over here and here. And then I'll drag my text box over here, here, and here. Now all I need to do is edit everything. So total sales, this was going to be actually, going to be units sold. So I will change this to units sold. And now we need to put the values into these text boxes here for units sold, average IMU, and average sell-through. And as I've said before, we can't add a function to a text box. So how we do that is we have to go and click on the border, the outside edge of the text box. Make sure we don't see a blinking cursor here. We click on the outside border, and then we're going to direct this cell. We're going to say equal to, and then we're going to direct it to a cell that we have our values. So we're going to put our values over here, which is D23. I don't have anything in here yet, but if I hit enter, I can now see that I've put that location D23. All I have to do now is go over here to D23, hit equals, and I'm gonna make it equal to my sum of units sold. And then over here, I'm gonna make this cell E23 equal to my average IMU. So we'll go equals, we'll click over here. We have a complicated pivot table equation. But all we need to do is go over here to our template. For average IMU, we're going to click on the outside border. We'll say equal, and then we go to this cell, which is E23. And as you can see, it puts that number in here. Now we need to change the size of these. Now we need average sell through. So I'm going to go over here. I have my average sell through. Let's put it right down here. Equals average sell through. This cell will be G23. We go over here, back to our dashboard template, click on the outer edge of this text box to make that blinking cursor disappear. And then we say equals. Go to our pivot table sheet, click on this cell, which is going to be G23 in this case. Hit enter. And there's our number. And we can change our size here. So let's make our first chart, sales by category. I'm going to go back to my pivot tables. We'll click on our pivot table. And if we go to pivot table analyze, we have a pivot table chart button. I'm going to go and click on a simple column chart, maybe a little bit three-dimensional. I'll hit OK. And we have all kinds of graphic options. Mac users will probably have to go to your design tab to manipulate these. PC users have that also, but we can also go over here. We have these little buttons and I can say, oh, maybe I don't want my grid lines visible. Maybe I don't want my legend visible. I just want my chart. I can change my title here to total sales. Let's grab this chart. We'll copy it, Control or Command X, put it onto our dashboard template. Well, I'm going to click on this merged grouping of cells and we'll paste it in and adjust the size. Again, we can change all of these graphics that we see in our charts. If I were to click on my bar charts, I can see I have properties over here that I can change, like how much space is there between my columns. You see that? I can, there are lots of options. I'm going to let you use your best judgment to see how nice you want to make it look. For units sold by brand, let's go back here. Units sold by brand. Let's create a pivot chart. I'm going to go to Pivot Table Analyze, click on Pivot Chart. Let's do a sideways bar this time. I'll click OK. I'm going to make some adjustments. I'm going to make my grid lines disappear. We'll make my legend disappear. I'm going to take my table here, Control or Command X. We'll cut it out. We'll go to our dashboard here. Let's paste that in here. And again, we can make this a little bit interesting looking if you want. We can do that to this one too, if you want it to match. Make it look kind of interesting. We can click on our bars here to adjust, to make adjustments with our distances between our gaps. Let's make this last chart sell through by category. I'm going to click on this pivot table. We will go to our pivot table chart. Let's choose a pie chart today. 3-dimensional pie chart. Again, with these graphics, you can just grab these and adjust them. You can pull them apart. We can add labels. We can do all kinds of things to these charts here. I'm going to cut this chart out. Make any other kind of adjustments we want to make it look kind of interesting. And again, this is not sum of total sales. This is sell through by category. For this last chart, inventory and markdown risk, we need a 4th pivot table, of course. So I'm going to copy and paste another pivot table. So I took one of these pivot tables over here and I copy and pasted it down here. Now for my pivot table fields, I put on-hand units in rows and sum of markdown sales in my values. Markdown sales risk over here. Now I'm going to go create a pivot table chart. Let's do a line chart here with plot points. We'll hit OK. Call this one markdown risk. Let's grab this table. Let's grab this chart. Let's cut it out. Put it onto our dashboard. We'll resize this. Make any adjustments if you want to make it look more interesting. Remove our grid lines. We can add data labels if you want. We can grab these data labels and move them and adjust the size of everything. Whatever you want to send your message to whomever you're trying to show this to. You have these options available. Okay, now let's see if this all works here. I'm going to click around on my buttons and we'll see all of our information changing, which is good. Turn multi-select back on. I'm going to select everything again. So I know my dashboard is working. If you want to continue to adjust the look of your dashboard, there are all kinds of options available. Over here under view, we don't need to see all of our grid lines. We could just make our grid lines disappear, or we could just start grabbing groups of rows and adjusting the color of our fill. Perhaps we wanted to have different colors over here. It's really up to you, whatever you want to do. All right, I think that's it, except for the analysis questions. I already did the first one for you. Which category is driving most of the sales? Let's take a look at our dashboard. Let's take a look. Which one is driving most of our sales? Accessories, our total sales is 30,000. Denim, we have 73,000. Dresses, we have 122,000. Tops, we have 35,000. We can see dresses is the clear category that's driving most sales. And continue to use your pivot tables to answer all these questions. For the highest productivity question, I have it over here under my README. productivity equals sales divided by unit sales. Right? Here's the equation you need to use to answer this question. But go ahead, use your pivot tables now, answer these questions. Don't forget to label your work with your name on it, upload it to Canvas. Congratulations, everybody. I'll see you around.